Oh, well, this is exciting. Earlier today, we're being told tourists and National Trust rangers saw the legendary fin disappear into a magical doorway within the rock face here at the Giant's Causeway.
Scientists thought they knew everything about this cliff. They were wrong. A drone captured something that should be impossible, a 20-ton stone door swinging open inside a 60-million-year-old rock face.
The Giant's Causeway on the coast of Northern Ireland is one of the UK's outstanding natural features. Its steep cliffs and deep bays form a UNESCO World Heritage Site.
What was hiding behind it has been locked away from the public ever since. 7 figures, hollow, warm, alive, and slowly moving toward the exit. Researchers resigned. Evidence was buried. Careers were threatened. But here is the part nobody is talking about. One of them is already out there, and nobody knows where it went. In the autumn of last year, a 34-year-old electrician from Dublin drove up to the Antrim coast on his own, for no particular reason other than the weather forecast looked decent. Clear skies, calm sea. He had his drone with him, as he usually did on days like that, and his plan was simple. Fly it along the cliffs, grab some footage of the coastline, and post the best frame to his Instagram before driving home. He had done it dozens of times before. It was a routine he had settled into over the years, nothing more than a hobby, a way to spend a free afternoon. His name is Kieran Doyle, and what his drone recorded that evening is the reason we are talking about any of this today. The location was the Giant's Causeway, one of the most visited and most studied stretches of coastline in the United Kingdom. Situated on the north coast of Northern Ireland, it is a UNESCO World Heritage Site and has been the subject of scientific research for well over 2 centuries. The landscape is defined by roughly 40,000 interlocking columns of basalt, hexagonal in shape, rising out of the sea and running along the base of the cliffs. These columns were formed approximately 60 million years ago during a period of intense volcanic activity. Lava at temperatures exceeding 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit flooded across the land, and as it cooled slowly and evenly, it contracted into these geometric shapes that look, to many people, almost too precise to be natural. Geologists have studied them in detail. The formation process is well understood. The site has been mapped, scanned, and documented repeatedly over generations of scientific work. There are no surprises left here, or so everyone believed. According to local legend, the causeway was built by a giant named Finn McCool, who constructed it as a bridge to reach Scotland. It is the kind of story that has been told to tourists for generations. A charming piece of folklore that sits comfortably alongside the geology without interfering with it. Guides repeat it every day. Children grow up hearing it. The two things, the myth and the science, have always existed in parallel without any real tension between them. That relationship between story and fact is worth keeping in mind because what Doyle's footage appeared to show forced people to revisit the boundary between the two in a way that made a number of serious scientists deeply uncomfortable. Doyle was flying his consumer drone along the cliff face as the sun was beginning to go down. He was after a panoramic shot, the kind where the rock meets the water and the light sits low and warm across the surface. He was not investigating anything. He was not acting on a tip or following up on a rumor. By all accounts, he was simply doing what he had done 100 times before in different locations along the Irish coast. The drone was in the air for perhaps 20 minutes before it picked up something that did not fit. The footage shows a section of the basalt cliff face moving. Not crumbling, not falling, not shifting in the way that weathered rock sometimes does under coastal erosion. Moving deliberately, like a door on a hinge. The slab in question has been estimated at roughly 20 tons of solid volcanic rock. It pushed outward from the cliff face slowly and steadily, revealing a space behind it. Behind the slab, there was no light, just darkness. The movement lasted approximately 11 seconds. Then the stone returned to its original position, and according to everyone who has since examined the footage, it sealed itself with a precision that left no visible crack, no gap, no seam of any kind. If you were standing on the path below and looked up a minute later, you would have no reason to think anything had happened at all. Doyle watched the footage back 6 times sitting in his car before he made any decision about what to do with it. He later said that his first assumption was that something had gone wrong with the drone's camera. that the light was playing tricks, or the lens had caught some kind of reflection off the wet rock. But each time he rewatched the clip, he could see the shadow shifting behind the slab as it opened. There was depth there. There was a space. He uploaded the footage that same night. By the following morning, his phone had not stopped ringing. The clip had spread across social media faster than he had anticipated, and the range of people trying to reach him was, by any measure, unusual. Journalists were among the first. Then came representatives from conspiracy-focused online channels, which was not surprising given the nature of the footage. But there were also calls from university researchers and from geologists who had seen the video forwarded by colleagues and wanted to know with some professional urgency whether it had been tampered with. The central question, the one every single caller wanted answered, was straightforward. Was the footage real, or had it been fabricated? That question was not an unreasonable one. Drone footage is relatively easy to manipulate with widely available software, and the internet has a long history of convincing fakes that fell apart under scrutiny. A moving slab of rock at one of the world's most famous geological landmarks was exactly the kind of thing that warranted skepticism before anything else. Several people who viewed the clip early on pointed to the smoothness of the movement as evidence of digital editing, arguing that rock simply does not move like that. Others noted that the lighting conditions at the time of filming, late afternoon sun reflecting off wet basalt, could in theory produce unusual visual effects that a camera lens might exaggerate or distort. But not everyone who watched it was ready to dismiss it. Among the people who received the forwarded clip in those first 24 hours was a senior geologist at Queen's University Belfast named Dr. Sarah Brennan, who had spent the better part of 15 years studying the basalt formations along that specific stretch of the Antrim coast. She had published extensively on volcanic rock structures across the North Atlantic. She was not, by the accounts of those who know her professionally, someone who was easily impressed or quick to chase unusual claims. When she first saw the footage, she was close to setting it aside entirely. Then she watched it a second time, then a third, and then she picked up the phone and called Kieran Doyle directly. She told him plainly that his footage had done one of two things. Either it had captured something that broke every established principle of geology she had spent her career working within, or it was the most technically sophisticated hoax she had ever seen. She drove to the site the next morning to find out which one it was. Dr. Sarah Brennan arrived at the site early the following morning. The weather was typical for the Antrim coast in autumn. Grey skies, a wind coming in hard off the Atlantic, the kind of conditions that make fieldwork uncomfortable but not impossible. She had brought her ground-penetrating radar equipment with her, the same kind of setup she had used dozens of times on surveys along this coastline over the course of her career. She knew the area well. She knew what the rock was supposed to look like beneath the surface. She had scanned sections of these cliffs before and found exactly what the geological record said she would find. Solid basalt, all the way through, uniform and uninterrupted, the preserved product of a volcanic event that happened 60 million years ago. She was not expecting that to change. She set the equipment up at the coordinates she had identified from Doyle's footage, calibrated the sensors, aimed the antenna at the cliff face, and started the scan. The image takes a moment to render on the screen. She waited. When it came up, she stopped moving. Her field assistant, who was standing nearby, later recalled that he assumed the equipment had developed a fault because she simply was not reacting in any of the ways a geologist normally reacts when data starts coming in. She was not writing notes. She was not adjusting the settings or checking the calibration. She was not saying anything. She stood in front of the screen for close to 2 full minutes without speaking. What the radar had found was a hollow chamber inside the cliff. Not a hairline fracture, not a minor air pocket of the kind that occasionally forms in volcanic rock during cooling. A substantial enclosed space 12 feet deep and 26 feet wide, hidden inside basalt that every geological survey ever conducted on this coastline had recorded as completely solid. There was no entrance to the chamber that the scan could detect. There was no exit. It was a sealed room inside ancient volcanic rock, and according to every piece of data that existed on this site before Doyle's footage surfaced, it should not have been there at all. That finding alone would have been significant enough to prompt serious questions. A hidden chamber of that size inside one of the most thoroughly studied geological formations in the United Kingdom is not something that gets overlooked by accident. The Giant's Causeway has been surveyed, mapped and examined in detail for over 2 centuries. Ground-penetrating radar technology has been used on the site multiple times by multiple research teams. The idea that a space of this scale had remained undetected through all of that work was, from a purely scientific standpoint, very difficult to account for. But what the scan detected inside the chamber is what stopped Brennan from moving. There were figures in there, 7 of them, standing upright in the dark. Each one measured somewhere between 7 and 8 feet in height. They were positioned in a precise formation, spaced approximately 4.5 feet apart from one another, and every single one of them was facing the stone door. They were not arranged randomly. They were not collapsed against the walls or scattered across the floor of the chamber the way debris or natural formations would be. They were standing in rows, organized and oriented in the same direction, facing the way out. Basalt does not form around standing objects. That is not a matter of interpretation or geological debate. Basalt is cooled lava. It is not a sedimentary rock that accumulates slowly around whatever happens to be in its path. The only way any object could exist inside basalt is if it was already in position at the moment. The lava was still liquid, still burning at temperatures that would destroy virtually anything we know of. That means if the scan data was accurate, whatever those 7 figures were, they had been standing in that formation since the eruption that created the Giant's Causeway approximately 60 million years ago. To put that in context, modern humans would not appear on Earth for another 59.7 million years after those figures were sealed inside that rock. The following morning, a geophysicist named Dr. Ian Gallagher arrived from Belfast with more advanced scanning equipment. Gallagher's professional background is in subsurface imaging. He has spent decades mapping what lies beneath rock, soil, and ocean floor. His work has included underground river systems across northern Europe and deep crust surveys carried out on behalf of the Irish government. He is, by training and by temperament, someone who approaches unusual data with methodical caution. He set up his equipment that morning in the same professional frame of mind he brought to any other survey, and he began working through the scans systematically. 20 minutes later, according to a colleague who was present, Gallagher's hands were shaking badly enough that he had to set his tablet down on a nearby rock and step away from the equipment. He walked in a small circle for about a minute before coming back to look at the screen again. What his higher resolution scan had revealed added a layer to the findings that significantly deepened the questions already on the table. The 7 figures were not solid. They were hollow. Each one was an outer shell, a thin casing with an empty interior. The word that several members of the research team independently used when describing what they were looking at was the same one: cocoons, or pods. The shells appeared to have once contained something, or possibly still did. The material they were made of could not be identified. Whatever it was, it had no match in any material database the team had access to. More pressingly, it should not have survived the conditions it had been subjected to. Nothing organic withstands contact with lava at those temperatures. Nothing synthetic should either, not for that duration, not under that kind of pressure. Yet the shells were intact, structurally sound, sitting inside rock that had been liquid fire while the last of the non-avian dinosaurs were still disappearing from the surface above. Within 48 hours of the initial scan, government agencies had been quietly notified. The communications were not public. There were no press releases, no official statements at that stage. What there were, according to sources close to the research team, were encrypted emails and closed-door briefings. The site that Brennan had spent the better part of her professional life studying was, without much ceremony, in the process of being taken out of her hands. A thermal imaging specialist named Dr. Niamh Callaghan was brought in from University College Dublin to check for volcanic heat sources or underground water that might explain the readings coming from the chamber. It was framed as a straightforward diagnostic exercise. Callaghan had carried out this kind of survey many times before on geothermal sites across Iceland and the Azores. She was looking for a hot spring, a residual magma pocket, or a buried water channel producing some background warmth, something that would fit within the existing framework and give the team a rational explanation to work with. It was a cold March morning. The air temperature was sitting at around 39 degrees Fahrenheit. The cliff face was equally cold to the touch, standard conditions for the Irish coast at that time of year. There was nothing in the environment that day to suggest anything unusual was about to show up on her equipment. Then she aimed her thermal camera at the location of the chamber. The screen flooded with orange and red. Inside that sealed room, the 6 remaining figures, one had already disappeared by this point in ways that will be addressed shortly, were radiating heat at 99 degrees Fahrenheit. That number is not approximate. It is not close to human body temperature in the way that a sun-warmed stone might feel warm to the touch. 99 degrees Fahrenheit is, to within a fraction of a degree, the internal core temperature of a healthy living person. There is no mechanism in geology or thermodynamics that explains how anything maintains that level of warmth inside cold rock. Heat dissipates. It always does. It radiates outward and equalizes with the surrounding environment. That is not a debatable point. It is a fundamental principle of physics. Anything warm, sealed inside freezing basalt, and surrounded by Atlantic Ocean air should have reached thermal equilibrium with the rock around it within days. Not centuries. Not millennia. Days. Yet here were 6 objects, sealed inside a chamber that had been locked inside a cliff for 60 million years, radiating steady, unwavering body heat on a cold morning on the Antrim coast. Callahan recalibrated her equipment. She swapped the batteries. She repositioned the camera and ran the scan from 3 separate angles. Each time the reading was the same. 99 degrees, consistent and unmistakable. She borrowed a second thermal unit from Gallagher and ran the entire sequence again using completely different hardware. Same result. She turned to her colleagues and asked in full seriousness whether someone was playing a prank on her. When she looked at their faces and saw that nobody was laughing, she understood that they were not. She packed her equipment into her car without saying another word to anyone on site and did not respond to a single email or phone call for the next 3 weeks. When she eventually did reply, it was 1 sentence. She said she needed more time to process what she had seen. The vibration sensors were installed along the rock face as part of the same monitoring setup that had produced the thermal readings. Their purpose was straightforward enough. The team wanted to know whether there was any subsurface movement that might help explain what the scans were showing. Anything that could be attributed to tidal pressure, seismic activity, or the kind of low-level geological shifting that is common in coastal cliff formations. What the sensors picked up was none of those things. There was a rhythmic pulse coming from inside the rock. It repeated every 4.7 seconds. It was consistent. It was steady. It did not vary. One of the senior researchers on the team, speaking on record and choosing his words with evident care, said that the pattern was indistinguishable from a slow heartbeat. Not similar to one, not reminiscent of one. Indistinguishable from one. The thermal readings were not stable either. They spiked above 100 degrees Fahrenheit at irregular intervals with no external trigger that anyone could identify, then settled back down to 99. The fluctuations did not correlate with the tides. They did not match the weather patterns or any known geological cycle. The team ran correlations against barometric pressure, lunar phases, and seismic activity recorded across the North Atlantic during the same period. Nothing matched. Whatever was generating that heat was doing so independently of every environmental variable the researchers could measure. It was behaving, in the clinical language of the data, autonomously. Every 72 hours, the team ran a fresh scan of the chamber, and with each one, the situation became harder to explain away. The 6 remaining figures were not in the same positions they had been in during the previous scan. The movement between individual readings was small, a matter of inches at a time, and it would have been easy to attribute to instrument variation or minor data inconsistency if it had been random. But it was not random. The shifts were consistent, and they were directional. Every figure was moving in the same direction, slowly and steadily toward the sealed stone door. The precise military formation that had been documented in the original scan was gone. The figures had clustered together and were progressing as a group toward the exit, in a pattern that one researcher later described as something waking from a very long sleep and deciding, without any apparent urgency, that it was time to leave. When the team overlaid the positional data from every 72-hour scan onto a single composite image, they could see the trajectory mapped out clearly. 7 data points, each one showing an unbroken path moving in a single direction, toward the door. Nobody in the room said anything for a considerable amount of time after that image came up on the screen. The government response came quickly. An environmental agency team arrived within 48 hours of the initial findings being reported through official channels and issued a public statement almost immediately. The statement said that the drone footage was the result of light reflecting off wet basalt. It said no chamber had been found, no anomalies had been detected, and that the area was completely normal. The public was given no reason for concern. It was the kind of statement designed to close down questions rather than answer them, brief, confident, and final in tone. But the agency had contracted Dr. Brennan to verify the site on their behalf, and she refused to sign the report. She was shown the draft statement, read it twice, and pushed it back across the table without picking up a pen. Colleagues who were present said she reviewed the raw sonar data one final time on her laptop, went visibly pale, closed the screen, and submitted her formal resignation the following week. Her resignation letter was 4 sentences long. The last one read, "I have seen enough." The agency moved quickly after that. Heavy steel barriers were erected around the relevant section of cliff, accompanied by bright yellow warning signs. The official reason given to the public was coastal erosion and a falling rock hazard. It is, as cover stories go, an effective one. It is mundane enough that most people accept it without a second thought, and it provides a legitimate sounding basis for keeping the public at a distance indefinitely. Park rangers stationed near the site relay the same explanation to anyone who asks, without apparent hesitation. There is nothing in their manner to suggest they know anything different. Whether they do or not is another question. Everyone who had seen the scan data knew why that section of cliff was suddenly off limits, and what happened next only confirmed what they already suspected. Before the research team was formally ordered to leave the area, Brennan returned to the site one more time. It was 4 days after the original scan. Standard scientific procedure dictates a comparative scan to confirm initial data and document any changes. She expected the chamber to look identical to how it had appeared in the first image. She was hoping it would. She had allowed herself to consider, in the days since the initial findings, the possibility that the first scan had been distorted by unusual mineral density in the surrounding rock, producing readings that looked anomalous but were ultimately explainable. When the new image loaded on her screen, she reached out and grabbed the edge of the equipment case to steady herself. One of the figures was gone. Only 6 remained. There was no corresponding event on the exterior of the cliff. Kieran Doyle, who had understood from early on that his footage might be significant in ways that went beyond a viral video, had mounted a motion-activated camera aimed directly at the rock face the day after his original recording. It had been running continuously for all 4 days, 24 hours a day. The footage showed 0 movement on the exterior of the cliff. Not a tremor, not a vibration. The stone door had not opened once during that entire period. Yet inside a chamber with no detectable exit, no secondary passage, no fracture line, and no displacement in the surrounding rock of any kind, one figure that had been standing upright and facing the door 4 days earlier was simply no longer there. No dust, no debris, no scratch on the interior walls, no tunnel. Nothing. It had not broken through the stone. It had not opened the door. It had left no trace of how it had gone or where. The 6 that remained did not react to its absence. They did not scatter or rearrange themselves away from the space where the 7th had been standing. They continued moving, as they had been since the first scans documented their slow progression toward the door. Patiently, steadily, as though the departure of the 7th was not a surprise to them, as though it was simply the first one to go. Dr. Brennan spent the months following her resignation compiling everything the team had gathered, the thermal data, the heartbeat patterns, the positional shifts documented across every 72-hour scan, the shell composition analysis from Gallagher's high-resolution imaging. She wrote a formal paper, had it reviewed by 2 trusted colleagues who confirmed that her methodology was sound and submitted it to Ireland's Geological Review Board. Her position was that the public had a right to know what was inside the country's most famous natural landmark. The board rejected it without significant deliberation. The stated reasons were faulty equipment, flawed methodology, and insufficient evidence. A colleague of Brennan's who sits on that board contacted her privately sometime afterward, using a phone that could not be traced back to him. He told her that the real reason for the rejection had nothing to do with the quality of her science. The concern, as he explained it, was about what would happen if the findings became public. Biological heat signatures and rhythmic pulses detected inside ancient basalt would not just be a scientific curiosity, it would call into question the entire established timeline of life on Earth. Every textbook on the subject would require rewriting. Every assumption about when intelligence first appeared on this planet would have to be reconsidered from scratch. The people responsible for managing that kind of information had decided, without much apparent agonizing over it, that the chaos was not worth it. In April, all monitoring equipment was removed from the site. The researchers were told plainly that they were to remain silent. No publications, no interviews, no discussion of the findings on social media or in any other public forum. Those who did not comply were told their careers would not survive it. But the evidence was not destroyed. Doyle still has his original drone footage, stored across 3 separate hard drives kept in different locations across Dublin. He checks them regularly to make sure the files have not been corrupted or accessed remotely. He has said to people close to him that he has not slept the same way since the night he watched that stone move. Something in him shifted, he told one friend, and it never shifted back. Brennan, Gallagher, Callahan, and at least 2 other members of the research team kept personal copies of everything. Sonar data, thermal logs, vibration recordings, positional scans, time-stamped photographs of every equipment readout. All of it is saved on encrypted drives, stored in places no agency can reach without a warrant. The last scan taken before the equipment was pulled showed the remaining 6 figures still moving, still pulsing, still radiating heat at body temperature. The one closest to the door was only a few feet from the stone entrance. Its rhythmic pulse was measurably stronger than it had been the week before. Faster, as though whatever was inside that hollow shell could sense how close it was to the way out. The question that stays with everyone who has seen the data is not really about the 6 still inside the cliff. It's about the one that has already left. When the chamber was first scanned, there were 7. Now there are 6. One of them passed through solid rock without opening a door, without leaving a crack, without disturbing a single grain of stone, and vanished. It is out there somewhere. Beneath the Atlantic, moving through cave systems that stretch for miles under the seabed, hidden in an unexplored section of the coastline, inside another cliff face that nobody has thought to point a scanner at. Or somewhere else entirely, somewhere that has nothing to do with the coast, somewhere beneath a city or inside a mountain range, moving through spaces that have never been mapped and that nobody has had any reason to look at until now. Over 1 million tourists visit the Giant's Causeway every year. They walk across the basalt columns with their families. They take photographs. They listen to guides tell the story of Finn McCool and his bridge to Scotland. They have no idea that 39 feet behind the cliff face, 6 entities are radiating body heat into cold stone and moving inch by inch toward a door that has already opened once. We have spent the whole of our existence operating on the assumption that we were the first intelligent things to walk this planet. Whatever is inside that rock suggests otherwise. Something was here long before us. It was sealed into the stone before mammals existed, before the first flowering plants appeared, before anything resembling a human being had any foothold on the surface of the Earth. It has been there ever since, warm, pulsing, patient, while every civilization we have ever built rose and crumbled on the ground above it. And now, for whatever reason, after all of that time, it is moving toward the exit.